Hey there, everybody. Welcome. Happy Monday, LinkedIn Live Monday. Nancy Fox of Fractional Connections. We went live a few minutes early today to give LinkedIn a chance to catch up with us. I have a really special guest with me today, a good friend, buddy, and colleague, David Bauman, Fractional Executive Solutions. And I want everybody to welcome him. So if you're with me, okay, LinkedIn just kicked in. Yay, glad to hear that. If you're with us today, will you please give us a wave? Let us know that you can hear us. Hopefully the streaming will be technologically effective today. And I've got a great conversation to have with David today. We're going to be talking about fractional pods. So first of all, David, welcome. Glad to have you. First of all, let's hear a little bit about you. Tell us a little bit about you and your business and what actually led you to becoming a fractional executive.
Hi, Nancy. Thank you for having me. It's great to chat with you again. Always love doing that. So I've been a fractional for 2 years, and it wasn't by choice. I used to run companies for publics and privates for quite a while, medium to large. And I was running an oil and gas company in Fort Worth in 2020. And oil and gas and COVID didn't mix very well. And so after we decided to exit that business in the middle of 2020, I decided after 30 years of moving around the country and going to do what I do for a living with many people, I decided to stay put. And I was actually working with a company within EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System. And my good friend Mark Winters was our implementer. And I went to him and I told him you're going to lose a client, but I also told him I was thinking about becoming an implementer. And he said, Dave, don't do that. You'd be a great implementer, but you would hate it because you need to be in the business. You're not somebody who's going to be happy seeing a client once a quarter. You need to be involved every week. And so he told me about what a fractional integrator, fractional COO does. I was intrigued by it. And so September 2020, I put my shingle out to see how it would go. And ever since then, it's been great. It's a great life.
Amazing. So it was and you actually got into it relatively early in terms of the terminology. Outsourced executives have been around a long while. We've had outsourced CFOs, we've had outsourced GCs, we've had a lot of outsourced people. In fact, I was an outsourced person myself. I was a fractional too. I didn't even know it. And then this term, thank you, Ben Wolf, came up with fractional leadership. And Ben's with us this morning. Hello. He came up with this term, and now we're fractional executives. And now it's 2 years later. So you're like a veteran in this world of fractional executives. So explain as you best understand it, describe what a fractional executive is.
It's great that you mentioned Ben Wolf, because he was the first person I spoke to, and he gave me 90 minutes of his time that he didn't have to do. He truly demonstrated the core value of abundant teamwork. And so what I do as a fractional COO/integrator is my sweet spot client. They're roughly a $4 million to $13 million business. Their number of employees is 15 to 50. But it's an owner or CEO that just really either A, doesn't want to be involved or drive the operations himself or herself, or B, many times they're not good at it and they know it. And it just takes them and sucks in their time away from what they should be doing as owners. The tagline for FES, Fractional Executive Solutions, is we give you your life back. And I've had a couple of clients who basically told me, he goes, this is great stuff that I just don't like to do, and you love doing it. It's a perfect match for both of us, and it truly is. So my responsibility is I'll have direct reports in each client. I have direct P&L responsibilities that I have to manage, and a lot of it is what I call mini strategy, the day-to-day, week-to-week process of getting things done, which is what I've done for a long time, and it's just now executing it on a smaller scale.
I have many more questions that are going in another pathway. We'll do it in another conversation. But basically, the distinction between a fractional executive and a consultant, as you very well outlined, is that you're actually boots on the ground, accountability versus consultants
Yes.
who go in, assess, and give a report and say, bye-bye, I'm not responsible. So, okay, so today's conversation, actually, you and I have kept in touch since we had our first networking meeting, and I noticed that you had mentioned something about creating a pod. Now, I've had hundreds of conversations with fractional executives in the last 7 months, and all of you guys know that. And I asked a lot of you, a lot of you have brought this concept to me. Can we start developing pods of fractionals? And I've said it's a great concept. In theory, we really have to have a very good model and a good structure for implementing it properly, or it can be very, very messy, and it can make a big, bunch of mud versus really be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
You have done it. So we had this conversation. I said, okay, now that you've done this, how did the idea of forming a pod in the first place? So I should really define. A pod is a group of fractional executives working together. And then I'm going to let you take it from there. It could be with one client, could be with many clients. What really helped you come up with the notion of this?
That's a great question. So our pod is called the Fractional Gurus, fractionalgurus.com. Shameless plug there. And it involves myself with FES. It involves Brian Snodgrass with Nitro Supply Chain Solutions, Kimberly Tips at Alchemy HR, and Noman Punja at Accountivation. And Noman is the one that gave me the idea for this. The common thread among the four of us, at one point, all three of them worked for me when I had a full-time job. Noman was a fractional CFO for me. Kimberly was a fractional HR, and Brian was my full-time VP of supply chain. And so when I was first starting out and preparing to do what I was doing here, I decided I needed to figure out how to make FES and myself appear larger than I was. And also I had an idea to go and work maybe with private equity. And so I actually found a group in Nashville that I reached out to. And the first thing they asked me was, well, who's in your group, and tell us your experience. So I told them about the three of them and myself before I told the three actual fractionals that we were going to do this. Luckily, they were okay with that.
What we call pre-sold. You just sold before it was real. I love it.
Exactly. So what we did was, we started talking about it, and we really, after we all went our separate ways, we just literally had a Friday call, just staying in touch and talking about the ins and outs of being a fractional, because Kimberly and Noman had been a fractional before. And over the span of like 2 or 3 months into 2021, we started saying, well, why couldn't we work together somehow? How about joining forces independently to help each other? And it became, the fun thing was spending an afternoon trying to figure out what the name was going to be. and I forget who came up with it.
Try to get the URL for it, right?
Exactly. Well, we were talking, Noman was in there looking around, and he found one. He's like, I got it. And then there we go. The way it morphed was we started working with each other because we had a need, and it became informal to formal. Now there's no financial partnership. There's no, board meetings. It's just 4 people that really like each other, trust each other, and work well together, that will go and network and market together. The way it usually happens is, if I have a need for a fractional finance or finance help, I just call Noman, because I know what he's going to deliver, and I know his strengths.
How does it work with the client? So let's just say you and Noman go in, and there's this need by the client, and now you're going in as a team or a fractional pod. How does the arrangement, the actual engagement, get monetized and executed on the monetization basis?
So great question. So what we do is, because we're all independent, we'll have independent contracts with the client.
Okay.
So I have a client that I brought Noman in as our CFO on my recommendation. We've done some work together, myself, my client, and Noman. And then he negotiated and agreed upon a cost with that client.
Got it.
I'll bring Kimberly in for advice or counsel. A lot of times it's advice or counsel, and sometimes I'll pay them out of my fees because I need their help individually. What's a really interesting scenario is that Noman and I launched a client together in July, and we we had a scoping meeting with the client together, and we looked at each other like, this is going to be great. We're doing a pitch call together right now, and we know what each other's going to bring to the table. Subsequently, we brought in Kimberly in Alchemy because we needed a fractional HR, and the client relied on us to recommend somebody that we know and trust.
So the fact that you knew each other really helped accelerate your ability to bring in the pod or the combinations of the pod with the clients. It's really very, very helpful. It sort of brings me to, I was just having a conversation with a couple of other leaders in the fractional world, and we were having this conversation about the whole, when you get to know other fractionals, how do you do that? How do you really get to trust them and know their skill level? And so that you could have you happen to have worked with these folks before, supposing you had met them through networking or other ways, it takes time to get to know people and to really know the caliber of their ability, because you don't want to bring them into a client and, have substandard or challenging situations occur.
Exactly. We got to know each other. I got to know Kimberly and Noman when I was working full time in an emergency situation where I needed help like right away. For example, Kimberly at Alchemy HR, I had my CFO and my HR manager all quit the same day, the day before open enrollment at the end of December. And oh, by the way, we're going to switch providers and do new open enrollment January. And so I literally, after I was done with my 20 minutes of panic, what are we going to do? I was introduced to Kimberly. She showed up the next day and ran open enrollment the day after.
Wow.
Now, that's not it. Those in HR understand that's virtually impossible.
Yeah.
And then she was with me for 5 months and then recruited a full time. For Noman, it gets even more bizarre. I was at this same company and I was having a very difficult time with a financial audit we were having. And I interviewed Noman to be my full-time CFO. And he said, no, I'm this thing called a fractional. I only do part-time. And I'm like, oh, I really wanted to hire him. I said, well, could you do me a favor then? Could you get on a call with me this afternoon and help me with this auditor and pretend you work for me? He's like, sure, no problem. And he was fantastic. And so the reactions that they had and amount of stress proved to me immediately their abilities. Brian worked for me for a year and a half, and his skill and ability in supply chain was just phenomenal. I hired him with a goal of a 3% price decrease, and he delivered 12. And I'm thinking,
wow.
So there's a trust among all four of us that the big thing that works for the four of us is we know each other, we trust each other, and we know each other's strengths and weaknesses. So when we talk to a client and say, I think Brian's the guy, I know that he's the guy.
So this is where it gets really, okay, this is what everybody on the fractional side wants to know. Number one, what was the reaction on the part of the client, the entrepreneur, around bringing in a pod of people or a group of people that you personally were like? What made them say, hey, that's a great idea?
I think part of it is that after I've worked with the client a little bit, there's trust in my abilities and my judgment. And they prove that when we bring them in. The other thing is I'll describe their skill sets and their abilities. And after they talk to the client, there's many times they're going to say, okay, Dave, since you're going to manage it, I'll go on your judgment. So there's a lot of times if you're going to do this, if you're going to bring somebody in with you, you have to establish the trust with the client that you understand the problem and that you're vouching for this person coming in to execute as well as you do.
When you and Noman, that was when you actually advised the client about this opportunity. When you and Noman went in together, neither one of you was the lead with the client. You were doing it in tandem with each other.
Yeah, in fact, the funny story about that was, so Noman and I are both together in a Vistage Trusted Advisor group. And so when our Vistage chair, his name is Bob Whiteman, when Bob will call me and say, Dave, can you give 30 minutes to so-and-so? I'd like to, if you don't mind answering some questions, I'd appreciate it. And when Bob calls, I get on the phone. And so Bob asked if Noman and I would both talk to one of his CEs. And we said, absolutely, happy to chat. So we were chatting with them. And then it became answering questions to almost, they were interviewing us for these roles.
Yeah.
We did. And so it was funny. Noma and I are looking at each other like, I would love to work with him and he would love to work with me, back and forth. So it was like a tag team event. And we both said,
you were dating, you wanted to get married.
Exactly.
I love it. It was like, and so now question for you, because I want to make sure that this is something I know so many fractional executives want to really understand the opportunity around this. And we know as a fractional community that the biggest challenge is getting entrepreneurs to be very aware about the opportunity with fractionals, to be oriented to seeking them out. It's just starting to happen through groups like Vistage, EO, Pavilion, other avenues of groups of really the right sweet spot of entrepreneurs where they're at that scaling up stage. So where do you see this going for the fractional community going forward? What do you envision, and how do we run with this thing?
So as far as the pod, the fractional pods, I think it just adds more value to a client to give them overall access to knowledge and abilities they just don't have. I think when I look at the fractional world, like where I come from in operations, I used to run multiple divisions for companies when I had a full-time job. So I didn't see and touch every division every day. It was more about empowering the people that work for me to do it themselves. And it's the same thing as a fractional. Maybe fractional CFO is different about the longevity, but an operations person, you look at 18 months as the perfect time to say, you're either ready to hire somebody full-time because you've grown so much, or my job is to take one of your folks today and teach them how to do what I do. So I can leave and they can take the ball and run for it. But I think it's a wonderful opportunity, twofold, for people like me that can share their knowledge, pay it back, if you will. And the other opportunity is for small business owners to really gain access to knowledge that they just couldn't afford, and they can gain it. And hopefully the person they hire helps train their team to take the next step up.
So when you're with your clients, though, do they have, let's say it's you and HR and finance, right? Let's just say the three of you are available as your sub team. What if there are people in the company, the client company, where there is a CFO already, and they're not, they're just not up to the level that the company needs to get to the next level? Or what if there's already an HR person that's at a middle level, and there's how do you prevent the resistance on the client side, on the internal people? You have to earn their buy-in, right?
That's a great question. That's a fantastic question, actually. So when I go in as the fractional COO, I have to make sure that I'm coming in understanding exactly what they do right off the bat. So I follow the first 90 days playbook by Michael Watkins, actually. You just follow that. Right. And after 90 days, I absolutely understand the strengths of everybody, and I understand where I could help teach them. So if we have like an HR generalist, I'm communicating to the HR generalist that Kimberly can really help you become an HR manager, HR director. They can help you with your career, and they can help you here at so-and-so and so-and-so. And it becomes more of I really want to be learning syndrome. From an operations standpoint, I'll introduce tools to the folks as I go along that helps them see that they're acquiring knowledge. In fact, today I was working with an ops person where I like to bring in topics. I said, today, let's look at MSAs and let's look at terms and conditions, something you don't look at every day, but as a business person, someday you might want to understand it. Let's talk through that. And that's the knowledge that I hopefully can convey to them.
So if I were giving this as a highlight of your talk today or our conversation, I would say highlight, Dave gives them value, gives them points of value so that they can be helped in their careers, as opposed to being seen as a threat in their careers. It's really, really important.
Absolutely. I mean, let's face it. I'm not going to look. I don't have 30 years in front of me to work anymore, so I'm not going to take anybody's job full time. But I truly, honestly believe in paying back. I had a mentor that helped me immensely, and I believe in that strongly. And I tell people up front, if you want to learn, there's quite a bit of knowledge that I've seen. I've made a lot of mistakes and I've learned, and I can help you with the same thing.
Yeah. Carrie's asking, was that a book that you referenced in the first
Yeah.
few days?
Yes.
We'll put the link in the comments, Carrie.
Yep. It's called The First 90 Days by Michael Watkins. I've been using that book for 20 some odd years of how to take over a new leadership role, what you do in day one, week one, month one. It's a great guidebook to become a successful leader. Instead of having the 6 months transition, you have it in 6 hours.
That's great. We also have on the fractionals.ai website an onboarding checklist. If you want it, you can download it for free. So we have another question. How do most companies start with fractional? I've seen more fractional CFOs than any other function. Company may start with fractional CFO and then and others. What is your experience?
Great question. I'll be honest with you. So EOS, Entrepreneur Operating System by Gino Wickman, has really been a kickstart for people like me using the term integrator, which is the president, COO, nuts and bolts person. And the term fractional integrator has been, I've seen it going strong since I got into it. Ben and his group and Jamie Munoz and her group have really kickstarted that process. When clients reach out to me as far as fractional COO and they're not on EOS, they describe to me the challenges they're having where the owner just doesn't, they're a salesperson or a tech person, but they're not a make the trains run on time person. And they know that they need.
I love that. That's a great way of describing operation.
Yeah. It's make the trains run on time, and they need somebody that's a conductor and not just a passenger. And that's where I come in.
Great. That's fantastic. So before we wrap up, because we could go on, we have many things we could be talking about, so many. And by the way, every Monday we have more and more, and we're going to have, there's so many more wonderful sessions that I've got planned for you in terms of having other entrepreneurs share their experiences around fractional so you can hear it from the other side, which is really important. So David, I'm really curious. What do you think the fractional profession can do? What are some tips? 1 or 2 tips that you would, let me rephrase that. 1 tip that a fractional executive can do to form a pod successfully.
I would say that understand what you want to get out of the pod and make sure you find like-minded people that want the same. If somebody's looking to use you just as referrals and nothing else, it's probably not going to work. If somebody's looking for you for knowledge sharing when you're not working together, that's a good sign.
That's interesting. And a pitfall to avoid? The
pitfall is to make an agreement with somebody financially that doesn't make sense to both of you. I won't make an agreement with the 4 of them financially where we're sharing balance sheets. But the pitfall is some people literally look at this as an avenue for me to get more leads and more clients. And I don't think I would approach it that way. I would approach it as, how can I make my offering to my clients stronger? And that's really so much of what I see, David, is that in our community, the fractional executive community, the collaborative desire is very high here. Where when I started coaching, I mean, it would be coaches would run to other, 4 corners of the room before they would ever collaborate or help each other out. It is not like that in the fractional world, which I am thrilled about, and I am gung-ho about supporting. So thank you for bringing that up, because I will tell you that a lot of people have been sharing with me how much they want to start pods. They want to be able to wisely and smartly market them, deliver them, execute successfully. This has been amazing. I think there's way more here to unpack. I hate that word, but I'm just saying, to uncover. And maybe there's an article in here that you and I can actually, many people have asked me to transcribe some of these conversations. If you want a transcription of this, will you please, DM me or chat me in the comments? I'll work on that. And David, I want to thank you so much for being with me. Where can people find you? How can they hire you? How can they have a conversation with you? Tell us a little bit about where they can find you. So there's 2 ways. So my email address is my first initial D and my last name, Boffman, dboffman at fractionalexecutivesolutions.com. You can see it there. You can do the QR code behind me because we're really techie here. And also, I'm on LinkedIn and happy to connect with people. Anybody who has any questions about this, I'm absolutely happy to answer questions and to help. If you're looking for help, happy to do so.
You really are a fractional executive guru. Okay, awesome, everybody. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for joining us today, David. Thank you so much. I've learned so much. I've enjoyed it so much, and I know there's way more to do together. So have a fantastic rest of the Monday, everybody, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Nancy. See y'all.